multi-component Area AC site is located within the historic community of Clarksville, named for local prominent Quaker Dr. Israel Clark, who resided roughly a mile northwest of the Area AC site. Currently, the site is situated within an agricultural field south of Clarksville Road in West Windsor Township, Mercer County. The Area AC site is one of 7 sites identified during a 2022 Phase 1B archaeological survey conducted by Richard Grubb and Associates. In addition to the Area AC site, the survey also discovered the historic period Area Y site, the Areas F1 through Area F5 sites. The survey also re-identified the Stuart L. Reed farmstead site, the former home of Dr. Clark. Phase 1B, Phase 2, and Phase 3 excavations within the Area AC site consisted of 40 shovel test pits, 27 5-foot square excavation units, and 17 mechanically excavated strip blocks. These excavations led to the recovery of 14,692 historic period artifacts and 18 pre-contact Native American artifacts. They also identified a late 18th through mid-19th century dwelling foundation, 2 possible out kitchens, and numerous refuse pits and fence lines. A small quantity of Native American artifacts were identified within the Area AC site. These include an argillite biface midsection, fire-cracked rock, utilized jasper flakes, and quartz and jasper debitage. The presence of lithic debitage and a projectile point, as well as the results from microwhale analysis, indicates the use of expedient tools, lithic tool production, resource processing, and hunting activities, such as the cutting and scraping of soft tissue. The presence of fire-cracked rock indicates that cooking or other heating activities were carried out to some degree within the site. These Native Americans likely focused in larger base camps within the Bear Swamp area and came to the Area AC site for limited periods to engage in certain activities. No temporally diagnostic projectile points, cultural features, or native ceramic was identified, so designating a period for Native American occupation was difficult. However, according to lithic expert Jack Cresson, flake attributes and the lithic material identified can give us an indication of when the Area AC site was utilized by pre-contact peoples. His analysis suggests that the area was used during Paleoindian or Early Archaic period and Late Archaic or Early Woodland period. The pre-contact deposits, while low in number, also shed light on pre-contact Native American ephemeral occupations in central New Jersey, and therefore the site is considered a contributing element to the Bear Swamp Late Archaic Archaeological District under Criteria D for providing new information regarding early Native American settlement. Historic occupation within the Area AC site likely began when John Hullfish, a weaver, constructed a home in the late 18th century, around the time he married his wife Mary. During their ownership, they occupied a small parcel of land, between 3 and 8 acres in size, with minimal livestock. After John died, his son Ezekiel assumed ownership. Agriculture records indicate that Ezekiel grew a variety of crops, including wheat, corn, oats, hay, Irish potatoes, and rye. The farm also contained cows, pigs, chickens, and horses. Records indicate that by 1870, Ezekiel's small land holdings had expanded to 30 acres, and between 1860 and 1870, his real estate value had increased from $450 to $2,500. The Hullfish family dwelling, constructed of fieldstone, was identified within the eastern part of the site and measured just 16 feet square. The house was placed on a small knoll facing south to maximize solar exposure. A brick hearth was likely present along the east wall based on the concentration of brick in that area, though an intact footprint was not identified. Although not seen archaeologically, it is likely that the house had an addition on its east side, or possibly a second story to allow more living space for the Hullfish's growing family. Together, John and Mary had 9 children between 1795 and 1815. The couple's youngest son, Ezekiel, and his wife, Elizabeth, took control of the parcel and made it their home until the mid-1860s, when they moved to a nearby property to the east, possibly because the Hullfish family had grown in size and had increased their land holdings by this time. The Area AC site was abandoned and the house was razed. Archaeological evidence strongly suggests that 2 outbuildings, possible outkitchens, occupied the area west of the house, providing more room to engage in cooking and offering a sphere for the Hullfish women to participate in cooking, keep dairy products, and possibly engage in outwork. Such work may have included mending and sewing of clothes for nearby residents as well as their own families. The presence of these out-kitchens was evidenced by a series of post features in late 18th through 19th century subfloor pit refuse pits. It appears that John and his family used one out-kitchen, which was abandoned prior to 1820s, and the second out-kitchen may have been located slightly to the northeast and was used until the 1860s. High quantities of redware were found within the area surrounding the out-kitchens, as well as on the site as a whole, with 65 separate vessels being identified within feature contexts. Vessel forms were mostly utilitarian wares such as chargers, crocks, bowls, hollowwares, jugs, and multi-use dishes used in baking, food preparation, and serving. One of the most intriguing features identified within the site was feature AC-84, which was comprised of two separate yet connected features and included an oval-shaped basin pit at its southern end with a linear trench extending to the north. Together, the features measured 24 feet by 2.4 feet at its longest and widest. These features were artifact-rich and included 2,130 artifacts in a wide variety of types. The exact nature of the features and how they are associated remains unclear. However, the southern portion of the feature may have once served as a cold storage pit or a subfloor pit within an out-kitchen that was infilled with refuse, likely during one filling episode following the abandonment of the property in the 1860s. Based on the historic record, John Hullfish owned a small farm within the area AC site, the income of which was supplemented through his work as a weaver. In fact, archaeological remains from the area AC site do hint at John's occupation as a weaver, as well as other sewing activities carried out by members of the Hullfish family. The site yielded 3 pairs of scissors, a thimble, silver alloy thread fragments, 46 buttons, 2 bone button blanks, 3 glass beads, and 42 straight pins. Historically, females were expected to learn to sew, embroider, and mend clothing at a young age, so it is likely that these types of activities within the Hullfish household fell to Mary, her daughter-in-law Elizabeth, and other females, including their daughters. One thimble was found within the area AC site artifact collection. Thimbles were made in different sizes, from very small to fit the tiny fingers of young girls learning to sew, to large, used mostly by men tailors. Interestingly, the thimble identified within the site was relatively small and may have belonged to a child or young woman. A wide variety of buttons were found in many materials and types. A copper alloy button and 14 Proser type buttons, which postdate the 1840s, are likely associated with the second generation of the Hullfish family. 20 of the buttons could be dated from the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and therefore correspond to Mary and John's earlier occupation. Based on the number and variety of buttons, as well as other sewing implements found, it is likely that the women of the household were supplementing the family income by mending and sewing clothes for neighbors. This was also documented by Luann DeCunzo at a late 19th century African-American site in Delaware, where archaeologists found sewing items containing almost 900 buttons, thimbles, and pins. Although the quantity of artifacts differs greatly, the same hypothesis of supplementing income from sewing and mending clothes can be applied to both sites. 42 straight pins were found within the area AC site. Typically associated with sewing, they could be used during the weaving process and to a large extent in the fastening of clothing during the 18th century. During the 19th century, pins of various sizes could be purchased in single package and kept on hand for use in sewing and mending. Additionally, scissors, 3 pairs of which were found within the area AC site, can be used for any number of activities within the household, including sewing and weaving, both of which were practiced by John, Mary, Elizabeth, and their children. Incredibly tiny fragments of silver alloy thread, likely left behind by the family's sewing or John's weaving, were found by archaeologists. Traditionally, we tend to think of weaving, much like sewing, as a female activity. However, this isn't entirely accurate. In the late 18th and early 19th century, cloth production was usually divided between women, who worked as spinners preparing the fiber, and men who worked weaving the textile. Spinning wheels, commonly used by women, were often small enough to fit in the corner of the house, so they were able to multitask, spinning yarn while also doing certain chores such as cooking. Prior to the introduction of the power loom in the 1830s, weavers were skilled artisans who apprenticed to a master weaver. They were also generally male. In 18th century Pennsylvania, the craft of weaving could be passed down through families or could be learned through an apprenticeship. At the end of 7 years, or an otherwise agreed upon period, the apprentice would assist the master until they were ready to take over the weaving business. The master would continue to work as a weaver or turn their focus to agricultural pursuits. The most common form of raw materials used in weaving was flax and wool, which were available on many farms. It is not uncommon for weavers to also work as farmers. Weaving done on farms typically happened during the winter months when agricultural activities were at a lull, and in the spring when the sheep's wool had been washed and sheared, and flax had been harvested and soaked in preparation of spinning and weaving. While it is possible that John resourced the raw materials from his own farm, it is more likely that he acquired the material from his neighbors, the Cooks, who historic documentation shows grew flax and kept sheep. Additionally, according to Adrian Hood, who studied weaving practices in eastern Pennsylvania, weavers often operated on a custom order basis, using raw materials provided by their customers, perhaps supplemented by yarn produced from their own household, or that they obtained in payment of services. Weavers needed skill and training to practice their craft, but they also needed specialized tools and a location to store those tools, as well as perform the weaving. In addition to the loom, these tools included reeds, quilling wheels, brushes, weaver's shears, and needles. The tools were often expensive, and it was likely that the rural weaver would have owned most, if not all, the tools needed. Tools may have been passed down through families or would have been purchased by an apprentice when starting out in their craft. Probate inventories would often list looms and other weaving tools with yarn and fiber. Unfortunately, John died without a will, and a probate inventory of his property was not recorded. However, we can assume that he worked in an outbuilding on his property. Adrian Hood noted that there are many different sized looms, and the size of the loom used determined what kind of weaving was being done. The rural Pennsylvania weavers typically used looms that had wooden frames and were about 6 feet high, 5.5 feet deep, and 4 feet wide. If John utilized a loom of this size, it is unlikely that he would have been able to keep the loom within his family home. Additionally, the process of weaving was loud and dusty, and many weavers chose to work in outbuildings on their properties. It is likely that John would have chosen this option. John was the only craftsman within the Hullfish family. Although listed as a farmer in 1850, 1870, and 1880 census, John's son Ezekiel was recorded as a blacksmith in 1860. Therefore, like his father, Ezekiel may have worked as a blacksmith to supplement the family income while there was a break in agricultural activities to be conducted. However, unlike his father, it doesn't appear that he conducted his blacksmithing within the Area AC site. In 1842, Ezekiel purchased a small triangular piece of land consisting of 1.23 acres from Jacob Fisher. It is on this lot, located roughly 600 feet northeast of the Area AC site, that a blacksmith shop was depicted along Clarksville Road in 1849. It is probable that Ezekiel worked as both a blacksmith at the shop and as a farmer within the Area AC site. In conclusion, the archaeology of the Area AC site gives insight into 2 generations of a single family who lived and worked within this small section of West Windsor Township. The Hullfish family were master artisans, worked as skilled craftspeople who supplied local markets with goods, and also owned enough land to supplement income with the sale of livestock and garden vegetables. The women in the Hullfish family also likely engaged in outwork to supplement income. In closing, I'd like to thank all the individuals involved in making this project a success.